Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet, and welcome to the Japan or Suzuka post-race reaction. What was your thoughts on this race? Was it dull? Yeah, I think it was dull myself. So I'd probably give it maybe 3 out of 10. With the low tire deg that this season has on this circuit due to the weather conditions, it really just didn't play out well. And I usually like this race, but unfortunately this season it just didn't play out the way I wanted it to. There wasn't really much pit strategy, and there wasn't a whole lot of on-track action either. But what was your thoughts on this race? Without further ado, we'll get to the drivers, and I'll go through them and see what I know about how they did and what happened to them during the race. So like normal, I'll start off with the back of the pack and work my way to the front, and I'll give you a little bit of more detail on anything that I know about what happened to the driver or other aspects that caused them to be in the finishing position that they were in. We will start off with Lance Stroll, who started off in 20th position and ended up in that same position. He did actually do a 2-stop pit strategy, starting on lap 9, went from softs to a set of hards, and then went to lap 30 on that set of hards where he switched to a set of mediums. He was the only person to go to a 2-pit strategy, and I think that cost him most of his issues. He was not able to undercut anyone in that realm, and so he just ended up in the back of the field, and due to that 2-pit stop strategy, he ended up 1 lap down compared to the rest of the field. Then we get to Gabriel Borletto, who started off in 17th and ended up in 19th. He had a very bad start on those set of hards, losing 3 spots on that first lap, and wasn't ever really able to regain those throughout this race. He did a 1-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 31 from those hards to a set of mediums. Then we come to Esteban Ocon, who started in 18th and ended up in 18th. He gained 1 spot at the first lap, then lost it later in the race. He did another 1-stop pit strategy on lap 32, switching from hards to a set of mediums. And so they were trying to go for that long stint, which didn't pay off. Then we come to Liam Lawson, who started in 13th and ended up in 17th, so he had a kind of a bad day. I think he was more trying to figure out tire strategy for Hijar and how that was going to play out in his race, and so it kind of sacrificed some of his positions to do that in this regard. He did lose 1 spot at the very first lap, and he did a 1-pit stop strategy on those mediums, switching from those to a set of softs on lap 33. Then he really wasn't able to gain much ground after he switched to those soft tires. So he went a pretty long distance on those mediums, giving Hijar and some of the other teams around them some information on how well those mediums survived, but that kind of didn't play out real well with his strategy. I think he's doing decent. I think he'll be a lot better next week when they get to more of a familiar race for him in that regard. And then we come to Nico Hülkenberg, who started off in 16th and ended up in 16th. He did gain 1 spot at the very beginning of that first lap, and then he did a 1-stop, stopping on lap 22, switching from mediums to a set of hards. And then we get to Jack Doohan, who started off in 19th after having some issues in qualifying and the pre-practice runs where he crashed his car, so he didn't have a whole lot of time in that car trying to develop it. So he did fairly well, I think, jumping into that car for the race, gaining some positions there. He did gain 1 spot at the very first lap, and he did a 1-pit stop strategy, stopping on lap 15 to switch from a set of softs to a set of hards. So he tried to take the advantage of that soft tire at the beginning, try to get around some people, and then went long on that set of hards at the end, trying to maintain those positions. He was switched places with his teammate Gasly on lap 33 for that 16th position. Then we come to Carlos Sainz, who started the race in 15th and ended up in 14th. He did lose a spot at the very beginning of the first lap and did a 1-stop on lap 33, switching from a set of mediums to a set of softs. So he was the other person that decided to go for softs instead of those hard tires, and that helped Carlos out a little bit, but not quite enough to get him back into the points. He had a 3-place grid penalty for impeding in qualifying, so that hurt him quite a bit during this race, dropping him back into that 15th spot. So he may have been closer to the point range if it wasn't for that 3-spot grid penalty. So they'll have to watch that out in the future to see if they can avoid that and get him back closer to those point range positions to start off with, where he can really fight for some points. He did have a little bit of action on track. He did pass Hulkenberg for 15th on lap 2. He passed Lawson on lap 36 for 16th. He passed Hulkenberg again for 15th on lap 49. And he passed Duhan 14th on lap 51. So he did a little bit of action in that mix as well. Then we come to Pierre Gasly, who started in 11th and ended up in 16th. So he kind of dropped down a few spots, not having the greatest day in those Alpines. He did lose a spot at the very beginning in that first lap. He did have a one-stop pit strategy on lap 24, switching from mediums to a set of hards. And he swapped places for 15th with Duhan on around lap 33. Then we come to the back-end Red Bull driver, Yuki Tsunoda, who started in 14th and went to 12th. Had a bad qualifying session, gained a couple positions during the race, so not a horrible job from Yuki. Seems to be doing well, trying to adapt to that Red Bull, so hopefully he can really put things together next weekend and really show what he can do in that full Red Bull. He did gain a spot on that first lap. He had a one pit stop strategy on lap 23, switching from mediums to a set of hards. He did pass Hadjar on lap 30 for 9th, and he was voted the driver of the day. Now, I wouldn't probably voted him driver of the day. I know this was his home race in that Red Bull for the first time, so that's all fun and games and really exciting, but I don't think he really deserved it this day. I probably would have given it to Hadjar or Max Verstappen in this run to see how they would have handled that pressure and be able to keep up with everybody around them. So that's kind of my thoughts on driver of the day. I think Yuki got it because it was, I said, dropping into that home race, into the Red Bull, not doing horribly, not dropping back, but doing okay, kind of gave him that edge for the driver of the day in the fans' perspective. Then we come to Fernando Alonso, who started in 12th and ended up in 11th. He did gain a spot on that first lap and had a one pit stop strategy on 24, switching to a set of hards from a set of mediums. As I said, there's not a whole lot of action, and so the back of the pack had most of the action, but there's some a little bit in the mid pack. Now we will move on to the top 10. So at the end of that top 10, we have Oliver Behrman, who started in 10th and ended up in 10th. I think that was a really great job for Oliver Behrman to end up in the qualifying in 10th, and it was good to see that he could maintain that in the race as well. I don't think that Haas has that much power in it, and so I think it was probably should be farther back in that pack, especially with Ocon, rounding out the bottom half of that. I think that was kind of outstanding for Behrman to be able to get it up into that Q3 position, and it ended up in that 10th position and maintaining that throughout this race. He did have a one stop on lap 23, switching from a set of mediums to a set of hards. Then we have Alexander Albon, who started in 9th and ended up in 9th. He had a one pit stop strategy as well, stopping on lap 24 from mediums to a set of hards. He just did pass Borletto for 12th on lap 28, passed Ocon for 11th on lap 29, passed Sainz on lap 31 for 10th, and passed Lawson for 9th on lap 33. So he had a little bit of action in that time period where everybody was pitting in as well, so that kind of helped him out and get him back up into the points. Doing a really good job for Alex Albon, really showing what that Williams can do. Hopefully Sainz can get back up there and be more competitive with his teammate and see how Williams can handle those situations. Then speaking of great spots, we have Ajit Kaiser, who started in 7th and ended up in 8th. He did lose a position during this race, but he did an excellent job, I think, as a more of a rookie in that Racing Bull, who really I didn't think was going to be up in that competitiveness. I thought they were going to be near the back of the pack, so I think he's doing an excellent job in this run. He had a one pit stop strategy on lap 25, switching to a set of mediums, from a set of mediums to a set of hards. He did pass Lawson for 8th on lap 32. Then we have Lewis Hamilton, who started in 8th and ended up in 7th, passing Kaiser on lap 5 for that 7th position. So you can't really blame Ajit Kaiser in that running when you have that championship behind you and you're a rookie trying to maintain those positions. But he did a really good job, I think, in that running, and it gives it a little bit of credence to Lewis Hamilton keeping up and getting the most points as he could in this run. He did have a one pit stop strategy on lap 30, switching to a set of mediums from a set of hards. And I said he did pass Ijik Kaijar for that 7th position. And then we have Kimi Antonelli, who did a really good job as another rookie in that Mercedes, which is really good, I think, for this season. A lot better than last season overall for that Mercedes, it looks like, so far in this season. He started off in 6th and ended up in 6th. He did have a one pit stop strategy on lap 31, switching from a set of mediums to a set of hards. And he had the fastest lap overall this season, all this race. So he was the youngest driver, I think, to lead a race this time, which is kind of cool to see. And he was the youngest, I think, to have the fastest lap for this circuit in this running. So a couple of, records there, even though Max is going to maintain the youngest driver to win a race. So we'll have to see if that ever gets broken in the future seasons. And then we come to the top 5, where we have George Russell, who started in 5th and ended up in 5th. He did a one pit stop strategy, stopping on lap 19 from a set of mediums to a set of hards. So he was one of the first people to pit, trying to shake things up a little bit to see if he could get around Charles Leclerc in that run, which didn't really play out for him. But at least they gave it a shot, wherein like most of the people up front kind of stayed in that same line without too much action. Where we come with Charles Leclerc, started in 4th, ended up in 4th, one pit stop strategy, stopping on lap 21 from a set of mediums to a set of hards. Then we have Oscar Piastri, who started in 3rd, ended up in 3rd. Again, one pit stop strategy, stopping on lap 20 from that set of mediums to a set of hards. Lando Norris starting in 2nd, ended in 2nd, one pit stop strategy, stopping one lap later on lap 21 from a set of mediums to a set of hards. He did have that close exit on that pit exit with Max Verstappen, which there was some argument over the radios, but I think basically Max had it in the right position, so I think they did the right call there. I think the big thing for me to take away from this is, did McLaren have the right pit stop strategy? I don't know of all the data, but it's kind of hard to see why you would pit exactly the same lap as Max Verstappen, or like some of the other people were saying, could you have split your pit stop strategies to have like one person try to undercut while the other person tries to overcut to see if they could, deal anything with that Red Bull to see if they could cover out both or not. Now, as I said, I don't have all the data to see how well the tires were doing, how well the times were set up in that regard to one another. So it's hard to judge, but it is one of those question marks that I think everybody has is, did McLaren really make a decision correctly, or did they have a lack of a decision, so they made a decision to try to run with more of the constructor standings instead of the driver standings? Because if you could have gotten even Oscar to overtake Max later in this circuit when he was right close to Lando, they may have swapped positions to see if he could put pressure and maybe even pass Max on track that would limit Max's point realm, which may have even helped Lando in the future, but it's hard to tell, even though it would have gained more points comparatively to those two McLaren drivers in the end. But anyway, that's all speculation and all interesting knowledge. That didn't happen, so we are having those into the 3rd and 2nd positions, leaving Max for the 1st position. So Max started in 1st, entered in 1st, had a one pit stop strategy on lap 21, switching from mediums to a set of hards. He had a decent start, cutting over in front of Lando, keeping him behind, and then kind of ran the race from there on. He did have one pass with Albon for 4th on lap 24th. After his pit stop, he had to kind of come back to the field a little bit while they were kind of out of sync with those pit stop strategies. And just to show you how the race went overall, on lap 5, he had a 1.4 second lead over Lando, a 2.1 second lead over Lando on lap 10, and then we had the 2.1 again second lead on lap 15 over Lando Norris. And then on lap 25 is when all the pit stop strategies were coming into play for this stint. So that left Kimi Antonelli with a 4.4 second lead over Lewis. And then by lap 40, Max was back in the lead with a 1.4 second lead over Lando. And he ended the race on lap 53 with a 1.2 second lead over Lando. So pretty final race, keeping Lando Norris about a second or a little over a second behind him, keeping him without that DRS in that instance, which hurt Lando's chances of really putting a lot of pressure on Max. I know Max was saying it was an exciting race. He didn't have to push every lap. And that kind of keeps the excitement up a tad bit, but we would have liked to see a little bit more action, a little more strategy in play to kind of come in to see if anything else could have happened on that way to the final position. So what did this do to our driver standings? So we have Carlos Sainz and Yuki Tsunoda dropping back behind Isaac Haijar, who moved up to 13th position with 4 points. And then you basically have Lewis jumping over Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon for 8th, now with 15 points. Alexander Albon dropping 1 position as Charles Leclerc jumps him for that 6th position, now with 20 points. Alexander Albon with 18. George Russell drops behind Oscar Piastri into the 4th with 45, and Oscar at 49 points. And coming to the big one, Max Verstappen, even winning that, gaining that ground, and so he's only 1 point behind Lando Norris now, so with 61 versus the 62 that Lando has. So the race is on for the driver's standing to see if Max can actually overtake or if Oscar can come back and put more pressure on both of them. And for the constructor standings, what do we have? We have the Racing Bulls passing Kick Sauber now with 7 points. And then we have Ferrari jumping Williams now with 35 points. And of course, McLaren still in the lead now with 111 points. And we gained some little ground here and there, but for the most part, the rest of it stays the same. Coming up next, we have Bahrain next weekend on April 13th. And we have a nice length of 3.36 miles with 57 laps run for a total race distance of 191.53 miles. That was first introduced in 2004, and the lap record holder is Pedro de la Rosa in 2005 with 1 minute 31.447 seconds. So until then, I will see you on the grid, and farewell.